On the Level podcast, your Masonic podcast. Join the hosts Billy McIntyre and Sam Earl Sedgey as they delve into the world of Freemasonry.
Welcome, brothers, fans, subscribers, listeners around the world, to yet another podcast of On the Level, the On the Level podcast. And I am with, once again, my brother, my worshipful brother, the one and only, Billy McIntyre. How are you, Billy?
I'm great, Sam. How are you?
Mate, I'm still glowing. I mean, I know I've been glowing for a couple of episodes, but it's been good, man. It's been a good couple of weeks, a couple of months, and getting a lot of things done, and we're having a lot of fun with you doing the Night Templar episodes, and I had a lot of fun doing the myth busting episode, and I have it's our stated meeting this week, so I'm very excited. So for those who are just listening in, I belong to several craft lodges, but the one that I'm an officer in, the Worshipful Master, which is the head of the lodge. And I've been an officer in there for a number of years now. We have our stated meeting, and the fun thing is that after our stated meeting, we're going to a place where they serve pizza, so like kind of like a bar, restaurant bar, grill bar, and they're going to have a Masonic U table for us, and I want to do some festive board toasting with the brethren, and I'm very, very looking forward to that because it's very reminiscent of how we do it in England, which I love. In England. They kind of turn up early, so going to it's only 4 times a year, so they get away with being able to do this to a great extent.
Hey, and let me tell you as listeners, if you ever visit Sam's lodge and he tells you that you're going to this place, because trust me, when I went to his installation, he already told us the name of the place he's going. I'm not going to throw anybody under the dirt here. We drove by and thought, oh my gosh, what kind of hole in the wall is this man taking us to? Because on the outside, this place don't look like much. And I'm thinking, man. In fact, the lady that was with us was kind of thinking, oh, we don't know if we want to go in there or not. On the inside, it's incredible. And the pizza, man, the pizza is outstanding, but on the outside, not so much. Go ahead, Sam. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want the viewers, the listeners, to kind of get an atmosphere of where we're at.
It's the old adage: never judge a book by its cover, right?
Doctor Who would say it's bigger on the inside.
And you know what? When I first went there, my friends took me there first. I was like, where the hell am I going into? But once you get inside, once you go inside, you're like, holy crap, this is awesome. So anyhow, the establishment, what Billy's talking about is the establishment where we had a feast on the installation when I was installed as Worshipful Master, and we had this massive feast. It was like there were 40 people there. There was over 50 turning up for the actual installation. There could have been. I'm glad. You know what? From a financial prospect, I'm glad 120 could have turned up. It didn't happen. And I'm actually, from my pocket. What was really funny is when I shouldn't say this, but I'm that kind of guy who doesn't hide anything. So I'm like, well, the installation started, and all these people would just pour. I was just expecting 15 to 20. So my experience of installations, and for those who are not Masons, installation is every year in the lodge, the new officers get installed, and there's a ceremony for that. And I've always been to installation. And most installations, you have 8 people, 12 people, if it's an open installation. Here we do open installations in America. So let's delineate this. There are closed installations in America, in Illinois, where it's brothers only, and we get to celebrate the new officers, and that's all really awesome. But then there's the open installation, where family members and friends are allowed to witness a Masonic installation. In England, there's just closed installations, and there is a bit of difference basically because the way we install are completely different to the way they do it in England, and both are cool. Both are really nice. But anyhow, when I got to the installation, and then and then the numbers started rolling in, and we went from suddenly it went beyond my numbers, which was I was expecting 15, 16 people coming, which was way above average in the normal installation in this area. Normally it's a lot less. Then it goes 20, 30, 40. I'm like, oh, geez. My wallet was starting to shrink in my pocket. And I was like, I hope that's... So when 50 came, and I was a bit sigh of relief when there was capped at just under 60. And when we went to this place, and we had a great feast. And I enjoyed it. It's a memory that I'll never forget. And it was great to have everyone there having the big massive feast we had after the installation. But I do it in a joke. Even if 120 were able to turn up, and a lot of them couldn't because they had loads of obligations and dedications to the lodges to do, it would have been fine. It would have been probably even more epic, and I wouldn't even mind. But me being me, I just thought it would be. I just thought, oh my god, that would have been an expensive endeavor, and it wasn't planned. So. It was awesome, and that installation, I'm still glowing from. As I said from the beginning episode, I'm still glowing from there. But what's really exciting is we get to do a festive board, and a lot of the English listeners, a lot of my English brethren, are very familiar with it. And one of the great things in England. So if you're an American Mason, and you go to England, go to see if you got time. Go to an English lodge. Now there are things you have to do before you're able to enter. You have to get a written letter from your jurisdiction of your Grand Lodge. The Grand Lodge then contacts the United Grand Lodge of England on your behalf, and then they do correspondence. And there are officers in the Grand Lodge. Grand officers that their job is solely to help you and get you into the lodges to experience, the craft in England, and it's a fantastic experience. I love it. I love the. See, I'm kind of the guy in the middle, which is I love the way it's done here. You have 10 meetings a month minimum, up to 12 meetings a year. In Scotland, it's very similar. The Illinois Freemasonry is very derivative from Scottish Freemasonry. In England, though, I see the benefits of 4 times a year as well. I mean, some people are like, oh, how can you just do 4 times a year? Well, what's really cool is that's 4 days off where your focus is on masonry. And so you turn up like 4:30 or 2:30 during the day, and it's a big day for everyone. And you start your lodge. A lot of lodges start at 5 o'clock, or 3 o'clock, or 4 o'clock that day, and so they get everything done. And usually everything is done on that day. So degree work's done if there's any degree work, and so you would open, and then you'll then do the degree, and then you go to the business, and then you'll close, and then when you finish about 6, 7 o'clock, and usually a lot of the lodges finish around 6, 7 p.m. You then go to what I love. This is what I love, the festive boards. And so you go to a festive board, and a lot of the older guys go, but not everyone goes. Some people who are just like, just can't because they got to go, they traveled far or whatever. But most people turn up, and the festive boards I've been to, they average around anywhere between 15 to 30 to 40 master masons. So there's a lot of us, and then there's the festive board is not just us just eating food and having a good time. There is a purpose there, and then there is a ritual which is so cool, and it's a good bonding exercise, and it's a place where you get to just relax and unwind, and you get to meet your brothers, and you get to have those brotherly conversations, and you get to have a really good day. And then Brits being Brits, then this so after the festive board, a lot of people just go home, obviously, because by that time you're hitting nearly 9 p.m., 8 p.m. ish, sometimes 9 p.m., 9:30. And so some of the guys like, oh, let's go to the pub. So then me, I'm like, yes, let's go to the pub. Let's just feast. Let's just continue our feasting. And so then we go to the pub, and then we're like there to like sometimes 11 midnight, and sometimes as well. Let's go to this. There are other places, and now let me delineate this. So when there are in England, we have places like similar in America called gentlemen's clubs, but there is another gentlemen's clubs where it's not strip clubs. It's literally it's literally a
A
gentleman's.
little bit different than over here
Yeah,
in
yeah, right.
America.
It's literally gentlemen's clubs where it's just men. They get this place where they eat, they congregate, they talk shop. Some places have gyms. Some of these gentlemen clubs have become unisex, and so women can enter as well now. And you pay a fee. It's like it's like a golf club, like a membership fee. So you get invited to those places as well, and you go into those clubs and you sit down and you have more drinks and you talk till late night. Some of the clubs have like a cigar lounge if you're into doing cigars, and you get to smoke cigars and you get to talk and you just get to bond more with a smaller net of people and you get to meet people, and it's really nice because then I'm still getting invitations from English lodges to inviting me, hey, we'd love to see you again, because we've made that really good connection and that bond. And there's some crazy things like there are my brothers from Drury Lane Lodge, which they hold their lodge in His Majesty's Theatre, which is insane. So you go through the back pass where all the famous actors go up, and His Majesty's Theatre is still there. They play some of the greatest theatrical plays that are prevalent in this age. And I'm in the lodge all the way up in this tower of the place, and this is literally a Masonic lodge. And then you go to the actors where all the actors eat. You go there. There's another place called the Actors Guilds, whatever. So I'm sitting where some of the most famous British actors of our time have been and eaten, and I'm eating there with my brothers, and it's just insane. And so if you are going to England, and if you do go, or Scotland, or anywhere around the world that you can go, visit your fellow craft members, and they're just excited to meet you and have guests from other countries, and they are great brothers, and it's like being home away from home. And so yeah, that's my thing about and so about the festival. So we're going to do a festival, and we're going to have something that's emblematical of what we do in England, and everyone's very excited, and I'm excited. But enough about all the stuff that I'm excited about, and I'll tap into other things that we're going to be doing this month in December that I'm looking forward to. But how you actually had an epic weekend.
I had an adventure at the time of recording this. I'm just getting back. So at the time of recording this, we're getting back from a good friend of ours, Glenn Gall, got married to his now wife,
Brother Glenn
Thea.
Gall. Yes.
Yeah. These are all Masons that I'm going to be mentioning. So in case I forget brother, they're all Masons. So a guy that most of you that listen to the podcast in the area, at least, Charles Robinson and his wife, Melanie, called me up and said, hey, would you and your wife, Sandra, like to make a road trip with us to Tombstone, Arizona, that one from the movie, to see Glenn get married? We're going to drive. Well, that's only 24 hours, and we're going to drive straight. Well, who wouldn't want to do that? So that's what we did. We took off Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we drove straight through because we thought, we'll find truck stop or something open on Thanksgiving. And so we drove straight through, and it's just as fun as you would think. But truthfully, we had a blast. We all talk amongst ourselves, and the trip went by pretty well. And just a little bit of background. If you say, well, what's Billy like? Billy likes everything. Billy likes sci-fi. Billy likes history. Billy likes everything. You couldn't put me in a box because I'm just interested in life, but especially history. I'm a history guy. So to be able to walk on in Tombstone, Arizona. It was just fascinating. I'd been there before, but it's just, especially the way we got to do this, because his wedding was going to be in the lodge there in Arizona, which was King Solomon's Lodge number 5. It was founded in 1882, and it actually started in this building. And it was, like I said, it's King Solomon's Lodge number 5, F and AM in Tombstone, Arizona. And it's a wonderful building. It's the biggest adobe building in the United States. It's still standing. It's got so much history in that building you wouldn't believe. A brother was actually the minister that was a member of that lodge, and also a photographer was a brother of that lodge, and also the witnesses were members of that lodge. Also in attendance from Illinois was a good friend of ours, and also the deputy king, or a deputy grand master, boy, I said it wrong like everybody else did the other day, of the Royal Arch, Grand Royal Arch, Tracy Harris and his wife, Christy, they come. Clint Schmock and his wife come. Mike Duffy and his wife come. We had a huge turnout of, for that far away. And we had a ball. We walked around the streets. The wedding was done in period attire. It was just fun all around. We got to walk around for a day first. The wedding was on Saturday. We got there we got there, Thursday afternoon. We was pretty well shot after that drive. Friday, we walked around town. We walked around town and kind of got the history of the lodge. Actually, there's for the people that know their history, or have seen the movie, they got Virgil Earp, which was Wyatt Earp's brother's petition, hanging up in the lodge. He was turned down. They said all the Earps petitioned the lodge, but they were all turned down because they were under trial at that time. So they was not accepted into the lodge, but they have their petitions there at the lodge.
Wow.
And during the gunfight at the OK Corral, there was 2 brothers that watched it through the window and witnessed it. And then the judge that overseed the trial and actually pronounced the Wyatt Earp not guilty, they was afraid there'd be an attempt on his life, and so they took him into the lodge. And at that time, there was only one exit in and out of the lodge room, and it was upstairs. So they said 100 Masons stood all the way around that lodge and stood guard for over a month to keep that judge safe. And he stayed up in that upstairs lodge for over a month just to make sure nobody killed him.
Wow.
So there's a lot of Masonic history right there.
That's insane.
And it was just outstanding. The Brotherhood, there was a lot of shenanigans. I'm not going to get into them. If you talk to any of those guys and you want to talk to Charles about being I didn't know what a flower dude was, but Charles Robinson was the flower dude, and he was a pretty little flower dude. So, you might want to mention him and ask him what that is, because I couldn't do it justice. I really couldn't.
You know what? I'm going to ask him. So, what's your brother Charles Robertson is a member of Frank and Nicole Lodge. Brother Glenn Gore.
Well, he's also a past Grand High Priest in Illinois. He's in everything. He's got so many titles. I don't think we could mention them all here without forgetting
He's a
some.
33rd Mason for the Scottish Rite. We mentioned him before. He's a great guy. Lovely guy. He's a legend. I said that before. He's a living legend. And then brother Glenn Gore, where he got married. He's a brother of Frank and Nicole Lodge as well.
He's a great man. He's very involved with the Demolay, and he's in the Arkwright. He's right now, I think isn't he the high priest and the thrice illustrious master? They're in Pekin, I believe.
I believe so. I believe he's head of the York Rite line in Pekin, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And
go on.
Yeah, and he's a good man.
He's a great.
Good friend.
Now the story is,
Yeah.
which is really nice. I mean, for people don't know, so he's married to a lovely lady called Thea now, Thea
Yeah.
Hay, and Thea, who's a wonderful woman who's put a lot into masonry via. So Thea's father is a mason,
Mm-hmm.
and he's actually a member of my York Rite, and I used to love it when he used to come. He hardly comes now. He lives in Arizona.
Well, he lives in Arizona,
Yeah, he
so
lives in Amsterdam, but he's a
right.
fantastic gentleman. And so Thea comes from a family of Masons. Her son Jake, a wonderful man, is a Mason, and he's actually the marshal. He's the officer in Frank and Nicole Lodge. So I feel very jealous. I'm very jealous. I was not able to. The invitation was given to me. I could not go, mainly because of it's Thanksgiving weekend and family obligations. And really, my wife hasn't been well. But nothing serious. But she's constantly in and out of doctor's appointments, and she's getting herself fixed up. And we've got another appointment tomorrow. So family obligations first, and I have to look after the wife. And sadly, these past couple of weeks, she hasn't been too well, and she's on the good recovery, and she's on the mend. So I wish me and the boy and the wife was there, because it sounds like you guys had an absolute blast.
We
And
had a
what
good time.
what's really amazing
Mm.
is the amount of brothers from Illinois. Mike Duffy, I know Mike. Hello, Mike, brother. Brother Mike Duffy.
Oh,
I,
they're all good guys. I mean,
all good guys, all amazing guys who traveled all the way just for this fantastic wedding in Arizona, in a lodge full of other Masons. And it must have been a very proud day for Thea's father, again, who is a Mason of over plus 50 years now, and all the Arizona Masons, all that connection, because Thea's father is very involved in Masonry still, even in
right.
Arizona. So it's just really cool to feel the family, the brotherhood, and the insane. The pictures were fantastic. They're all dressed up as cowboys and everything like that. Oh, I would have loved to have.
Oh, it was done in period close. Yeah. Because for people that don't know, I mean, look into it. I mean, it's nothing for, Arizona is an open carry state. So, and I'm a gun fanatic. I know Sam probably, is making the cross and everything, to keep, he's from Britain. They don't believe in guns. But so for me, I brought my 2 6 shooters down there, and we drove, and I carried my real guns. We didn't load them. I could have, because it's an open carry state, but we, uh, we dressed in cowboys, and we all had our regular guns, and we walked into the lodge. We had spurs. It was an incredible day, and the brothers are so, just like you would expect anywhere else, so welcoming. And just a couple little facts about the other things about the lodge. I asked him. I said, "Do you have big attendance?" Because Tombstone itself is a small town. Of course, tourism drives it, of course. And they said, well, for any given meeting, they said they have besides the besides the officers filling all the seats, they usually have 20 to 40 signliners. But most of them, he
Wow.
said most of them are out of staters. He said a lot of foreigners, from other countries. And
Wow.
I didn't realize that that was so popular overseas, but obviously it is. See, I mean, that's something I wasn't aware of. Maybe you'd be more up on that than I would be. But he said, but now degrees, he said, we're lucky to have 3 or 4 on the sidelines. And but then I guess that makes sense, because if you're traveling out of state, you don't know where a degree is, but you know when the regular stated meeting is. And you might travel, you might say, hey, I want to go visit, this day. And if we'd only known, but Charles had to get back, their stated meeting was actually Monday. Well, we left on Saturday so we could be back on Sunday.
Oh,
But boy, if
wow.
we could have just stretched out a little bit longer,
That would have been epic. That would have been epic. But no, it's this is
No.
this is this is the great adventure in masonry, where
Mm-hmm.
you create so many experiences and connections, and you meet so many good people around the world. And Tombstone, King Solomon Lodge number 5 in Tombstone. that's a highly dense tourist attraction. You know, you have
Mm-hmm.
it's always busy, and so I'm not surprised them having like in England when you get into to Grand Lodge of England, there are so many people around the world, Masons, who come on a monthly basis that they have loads of guests. Because it's the Mother Lodge. It's the Grand Lodge of Grand Lodges, and so Tombstone is like a high attraction place. I would guess
Yeah.
the lodge in Hollywood. Do you know that? There's a street in Hollywood where all the famous stars.
Sunset Strip.
Is that the place where they put their hands on the floor and they?
Oh, you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, Lord. Um, boy. I don't Walk of Fame,
Walk of
Hollywood
Fame.
Walk of Fame, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of.
So that
You know
road.
what?
So that
There's
road. That
there's
road.
1,000 people screaming at the phone or the YouTube right now.
That's
We're
fine.
idiots. But,
That's fine. Well, hey, I'm English. I don't mind not knowing the completely
and I
being
should know
competent.
better. So go ahead.
Completely incompetent in American geography, but in Hollywood, there is that Hall of Fame kind of like walk street where all these famous Hollywood stars, but you press their hands or their feet or whatever, and they're kind of like immortalized on this pavement. Now, there's a Chinese theater where the famous Chinese theater where a lot of the movies get previewed or have been previewed through the years and decades. Opposite the Chinese theater, very humbly, if you don't look up, because it's a big building, is a Masonic building. And it's huge. This is Masonic Lodge. And it says something along the lines of, we're everywhere. and my point being is I think that lodge gets a lot of visits because of the high tourist area. And so it should. So it's really nice that we have places around the world where we can go and visit as brothers and enjoy good company, good brotherhood, and make those connections and have those experiences. And it's just fantastic. It just warms my heart. It warms my heart
Mm-hmm.
and gets me. When I was I went to Spain. I went to Menorca, which is a beautiful place, and I wanted to visit the lodge there. And the vice chancellor, whose role it is in Illinois to get me all set me up. However, I wasn't able to go because the times they meet for breakfast, because they were closed during the summer. A lot of countries, like in England, they go dark during the summer, and there's no lodge for like 2 months or something like that. And so they were dark in Menorca, Spain. But the brothers would meet every Friday for breakfast in this particular area, and I was invited. However, that was the time I flew in, and that was the time I was flying out. So I couldn't get it. I couldn't do it, and I still regret it because I would have loved to have met them and established fraternal links and continued correspondence and all that kind of stuff. So it's just it's just a blessing. It's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame that other countries I don't go to, which have a bit more. There are places where Freemasonry is banned, and these are countries which are more autocratic or have a one-party state, and it's a shame. There's a lot of good men, and it'll be. I hope one day those lodges kind of come back, because up until the breakdown of the USSR and in the old Soviet Union, Freemasonry was banned. But as soon as the USSR was no longer the case, and you had the Russian Federation, which you have today, there is Freemasonry at least there. So that's a good sign. And other places where, those types of systems which are very stringent and very, in terms of control and all that kind of stuff, the Freemasonry is an anathema. And at one point we'll do a series on Germany and Nazi Germany, and how the persecution of the Freemasons, and how over 200,000 were killed.
I think we mentioned a little bit about that on one of our episodes, but Yeah, we need to do a deep dive on that.
Oh yeah, there's loads of stories about that, and it's amazing. It's amazing
I
heroic
would like to
stories.
mention. I would like to mention, no matter how many states you visit, and I promise you this, I can guarantee it. Everyone, you'll find some Mason that will tell you that they're so glad that you visited their state, so you can see how they do it right. I guarantee you. I guarantee you. I've never yet, because these guys in Arizona said, "I'm so glad you come here so you can see how to do it right."
That's hilarious.
Because it's a shame that you went your whole life and not be able to see it right until you come here, and you just have to laugh because it's just an ongoing joke. These Masons, real salt of the earth guys, great guys. They're just. We was sitting having dinner, and there was Mike Duffy's son was there, and there was another gentleman there that was not a Mason. And so he said, is everybody here Masons? Of course, we had a big table that was, except for these two guys. And this guy was the minister, and he was a general minister, and he's going to be listening. And he said, is everybody here a minister? Or I'm sorry, is everybody here a Mason? And they raised their hand because we were such a big table that they were not. He yelled, "Why not?" He yelled so loud. If they didn't pee their pants, I'm surprised because that was so loud. And they jumped out of their seats. But it was just, they start laughing. He goes, "You should be," and I don't know if they decided that day or they decided they need to get saved. I don't know which, but they really got their attention. But we just had a good fellowship it was a good time. I wish every one of you guys listening could have been there because you see how Masons act and it was
How
fun.
we act, meet, and part, basically,
Right.
and
And that's what's important. The
absolutely.
fellowship is, masonry makes you better. But I can tell you what, fellowship's what keeps coming back over and over and over. The friendships you're going to make, the brotherhood. I've said a million times before I was a Mason, I've always had friends. I'm a people person. I like people. I can get along with most people. And I like to joke around, have a good time. But the people you meet, it's like a whole different class of people. And most of these people would do anything in the world for you. You just don't know what friends are until you get to be with Masons. Then you think, this is what a friendship's supposed to be.
mate, it's good times. It's good times, and
Yeah.
I think we got to be thankful for all the privileges that we've got, and always count our blessings. And it's just I just wish I'm just so happy. I mean, it makes me happy that you and Glenn and brother Glenn and worship brother Charles and brother Duffy and the rest of you guys had such a good time, and it just warms my heart because I know you had great
Yeah.
memories, and those are the stories I like to hear, and that's what really warms my heart about the Brotherhood. I mean, there are other stories about Brotherhood. There's a great stories from St. Paul's Lodge 500, how they went to England together as a group and they had a great time. Saw lots of pictures. There's a lot of brotherhood there as well in St. Paul's. One for my brothers in St. Paul's Lodge 500, and similar stories. And it's like there's a lot of happiness, a lot of good times, a lot of brotherhood, a lot of fellowship. That's really important. Fellowship is key. The bonds that we make and the brotherhoods that we make. I mean, I game with friends, as I mentioned in the previous podcast. I'm a big gamer, and I play all sorts of games, miniature tabletop war games, role playing games, and all the guys I interact with who play games with me and are building armies and all that kind of stuff. They're all brothers, and
Yeah.
it's just great. It's just great. So you have to thank yourself. You count your blessings, and you appreciate what you've got. And those timeless capsules, timeless memories. However, we are going to briefly touch on a few things because I think this episode is going to be called the Fellowship and Brotherhood episode, and I think it's very important to talk about these types of things. It's very
Right.
important to talk about these types of things because we can get into all the history, we can do all the interviews we want, but it's nice to have these real, heartwarming, real time things, experiences that we have, and share it with the rest of the world. And I hope that you guys listening, our fellow brothers around the world and non-Masons, can feel that kind of warmth and that community, and the fun. And for me, there are, you have to. For me, it's fun, fellowship, and ritual. And so those are my FFR basically, or RFF basically, whatever you want to, or if we can put an A in there, as actionable, ritual, actionable, fun, fellowship, and all those three things are very important to me. And we're all in a very good place where we're all getting more light. And there's a lot but then again, there's a lot more deeper stuff in masonry that's like really profound. And right now we're just touching all the benefits we get on the surface, and there's a lot of profoundness within masonry and within the ritual and within the traditions of Freemasonry that have gone through the ages. Factually, we have documentations of Masonic lodges, Freemasonic lodges being active in the 14th century, which is huge. Even when you go to our YouTube channel, YouTube even states that. We never put that statement up, but they state,
Right.
Freemasonry has been around since, as we know factually, since the 14th century, which is, several several hundred years. So we're talking about 1300s and going up. That's huge. People like myself who have who are historians and all that kind of stuff. I've been able to trace this all back to 3,025 years. I'm still working on it, but every time I dig deeper, the more facts and evidence comes about that this is a very ancient fraternity with a lot of profoundness and a lot of real meaning, a lot of wisdom. And so we go into the Templars, which I think we're going to go into for the next 30 to 40 minutes. And there's a couple of things. We did a fantastic myth-busting episode on the Templars, which was episode 15, which has gone crazy. We've had 3,000 views already. It was only been a couple of days. Billy was in the wedding when it was released. And, me and Billy don't really follow the views things a lot, and so sometimes we jump in and we look at it like a week later and or like a couple of days, like, holy crap, what's going on here? So we're really glad many of you.
Let me just throw in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sam and I don't get anything for doing this, and I mean we're not in this to be rich, because if we were, we'd be starved to death already. So we just hope that we can bring some light to masonry. Maybe if we can make one person see the value in masonry and make them want to join, or maybe one person that's been in masonry and just kind of fell out of it, remember how good it was and make them come back. That's our goal. We want them to remember what masonry was, or enlighten people to what masonry is. There's so much good in masonry, and you got to get away from that negative crap you see on the internet. That stuff's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of funny as well, but sometimes it does get upsetting when you see a lot of malarkey, a lot of absolute nonsense, and one of our defaults is we just keep going. We don't really respond. There's nothing to respond to be honest. But we've always kept our heads down and just done the good work. So the myth busting episode has gone down really well, and then it was very entertaining. And something I didn't mention is the second temple of King Solomon was destroyed in 90 AD. A couple of decades after Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's really interesting because during those decades, even though it was under Roman control, the Hebrews still ran it. They had to pay a tithe to Rome, and that was heavy taxation, and that taxation was becoming more heavy, which led to the rebellion, which led to the Romans sending legions, a gentleman called Titus, who raised Jerusalem and the Second Temple. Now, This was actually predicted by Jesus. Jesus warned that the temple and everything, will be destroyed, and his prediction came true decades later. But in the time of the death of Jesus, and then if you're a Christian, you believe in the resurrection of Jesus, and beyond that, the apostles fled. In the minds of the Hebrews who ran Jerusalem's Second Temple, they were heretics. They were anathema. And so again, it leads again stronger evidence that in no way in hell would the Second Temple have the remains of Jesus Christ, the bones of Jesus Christ, the bones of Mary Magdalene, the bones of John the Baptist, the spear that pierced Jesus Christ's flesh whilst he was on the cross, and everything else that's been spouted.
No, the Pharisees hated Jesus.
Yes.
Because he was trying to destroy their way of life. I mean, that's the way they made their living.
Yes.
And they sure didn't want that.
Yes, the Pharisees did not, they did not like Jesus, and Jesus was an anathema. And, even today, the rabbinic Jews and Judaism, that's the reason why there is Judaism and Christianity, and then you also have Islam as well. You have the Abrahamic religions. So the point being is there is the myth that's been espoused, and you can see it on these big, massive YouTube channels that, the Knights Templars went into Jerusalem. They were given the Rock of the Dome, which is true. They were given the headquarters was the Rock of the Dome, where the Second Temple was. But then they excavated for years, and they found all these mystical. Well, no, it doesn't coincide with history. There's no reason why they would have the remains there, and why the Pharisees would keep the remains. Absolute malarkey. And again, it was trying to tie this Christian Gnostic view and alter and make Templars something that they weren't. Apparently, and so the myth of the reason why they were persecuted is they were a little bit strange, and they're doing these strange practices, and they weren't doing these strange practices. It was just the fact that they were a very humble order. They were kind of like the SAS, right, and the Delta Force. And when you have the SAS and Delta Force, how much do we know about the SAS and Delta Force? How much do we know about their operations? Now, when you have like the Holy Land, that that was critical to Christendom, and people say, "Oh, why is the Holy Land so important?" Why? Well, you have to remember these were originally Christian states, basically, that became Christian states, and then the Muslims took over those lands and more. And so, in the Christian mind, this was the birthplace of Jesus. This was the place where Christians lived, and it used to be, the Christians had, and then it was taken over. And so, and in other parts as well. I mean, Byzantians, Constantinople, the Holy Roman Empire was in Turkey, basically, and that got basically taken over by Sultan Mehmet in the 1500s. And so if Mehmet was not successful, Turkey may still be a Christian country with a whole different kind of history beyond the 1500s, and maybe, just maybe, the way the history would have completely alternated, because a lot of trade went through that route to the Silk Road, and the reasons why the Europeans had to go around and had to go through Africa and around Africa and then hit the Americas was they didn't have access through the port city of Constantinople to the east, and they were trying to get to the east. If you remember, like Columbus, they're trying to find a new way around this because the Muslims had control of the seas, and especially Constantinople, which became Istanbul. And so a whole history would have changed. And what people need to understand is that the reason why the Holy Land was so important to Christians is it in their minds, like it was in the minds of the Hebrew people, which is still today, because the Jewish identity is that you're an Israeli. And as that's been the case for over 3,000 years. And so the Christian identity is the Holy Land is part of Christendom. And that's why you had the Crusades. So you had these special forces like the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, and the Knights Templar, who were like the elite. And all their kind of like campaign funds and money was really, the focus was to protect the Holy Land. And they lost the Holy Lands. They lost the Holy Lands, not really due to a failure of the knightly orders, but more so a failure of how dysfunctional the Christian states were. One of the issues in the Holy Land was it was broken up into small Christian fiefdoms, and there was some, and in some periods in European history when the Holy Lands were in Christian control, there wasn't much support. And so the small fiefdoms had their own political issues and intrigues. There was one fiefdom that was loyal to the Knights Templars over I think it was like something crazy, like 9 generations of lineage of the kings. And then the last one basically went against the Knights Templars. We also have to remember that the Mongol hordes was a massive threat, not only to Christendom, but also to Islam. And, there was that issue of the Mongol hordes coming in and causing a lot of trouble that even the Christian armies could not withstand the might of the Mongol horde, and neither could Islam to an extent until there were certain battles that changed that course of particular history, which was pretty awesome within the Ottoman Empire. So my point being, my point is that this is the reason why for the Knights Templars, they weren't this aristocratic kind of like mystical unit where they deviated from the Christian doctrine. And I say this as if you go back to the series, and if you're just listening in, go back to our Knights Templar series. There is strong factual evidence that the order was developed through the Cistercian order, which the Cistercian order came from Saint Augustine, a saint in the 500s AD. And I go through all that. I go through the names and everything like that, and I go through it all factually. And then Saint Benedict, basically, who was in the Council of Troy, and basically, because of his support, gave the Knights Templars tremendous powers. But there was a strict codex, and this codex was how Templars lived. There were some quirky rules, like you must have a beard. So, and there were other quirky rules where every day there was like a couple of hours of silence and meditation, and a lot of this was a way a Christian monk would live. So I want to really emphasize that part of being a Knights Templar was becoming a Christian monk. That was part of the codex. You lived like a monk, basically. But the other part was your military. The other side of it was the military training and training for war. Now, you may find that as a Christian kind of weird. Why would a priest take up arms and fight for war? Well, we have lots of historical records of archbishops and priests and certain parts of the clergy in England and France in the Middle Ages taking up arms. There was a famous archbishop between the War of England and France, a French archbishop in the Battle of Agincourt, who took up arms and fought, basically. There were lots of priests who actually took up arms against the Vikings. There were warrior priests of Christ who did take up arms and fought. That Christianity, there was a militant hierarchy in the priesthood, but it wasn't prevalent. They were kind of like sporadic here and there. But we have lots of documentations of the clergy taking up arms. And there wasn't everyone, but there are historical instances of battles. And so the Knights Templar was kind of like the 2.0 of having a clergy that was able to be the official military arm of the clergy, and that's where you had the Knights Templars. And so these men of Christ who gave themselves to God, and some of them were able to relinquish their Templar duties after a length of service and go back into the real world, let's just say, and marry and have children, but were devout Christians. And many kings, Christian kings, went on to campaigns and crusades with the Knights Templars, and these are kings who became very devout, or were very devout. Some of the kings, sinned a lot and did a lot of horrible things, and then they realized their sins and they went on their penance to a crusade. Sometimes going on to a crusade was to absolve their penance of their wild ways of their younger years. And some of them became famous kings of note and notoriety. And so that's the real Knights Templar kind of history, not the kind of the warped history and just taking bits of things and creating this mythos, and then saying they did this because they were trying to discover the technology of this ancient lost civilization called the Atlanteans. And I'm not here to dispute that they were the Atlanteans and not Atlanteans, but a lot of myth is just connected together and it's very loosely based and no evidence has been given. And so the point of the myth busting is to set the record straight. And the other problem is a lot of through the centuries and even today, Knights Templars get a really bad name, and a lot of good Christians and a lot of good people, look at parts of like Freemasonry and Knights Templarism as an anathema. And the funniest thing is, a lot of the Knights Templar I know are some of the most God-fearing Christian men, and they've got nothing to do with this hocus pocus created idea of Templarism. And the issue is like, well, why don't you guys go out there and fight against these people and denounce them? And it's just not the way we roll.
Well, it's so easy. It's so easy for the world when you're looking for a way to prove what you believe to be right, is to, like, for somebody that's against Christians to point to something like the Knights Templar, which is famous, but they're so shrouded in mystery, because they're so long ago, and they've been so romanticized and lost in history that you can make up these wild claims and people want to believe it, because they're so bit larger than life people anyway, so it's easy to make them up, good or bad. People's made up so much stories, people don't know what to believe.
No, absolutely. And so we're in an age now where we're able to talk with common sense, with logic and truth. We don't need to deal with the Joseph Goebbels type of propaganda, and other parts of propaganda that comes from other places around the world. And we don't need to deal with the other part, the mass what is the biggest tragedy? The biggest tragedy of all this is the misinformed within the ranks of Christendom today, and within the ranks of other, great religions and great parts of Christianity, and even in other faiths and beliefs, the misinformation of what the Knights Templars were and what they are today. And it's a shame. It's a shame, and it's more to do about, in my mind, from my observations, about worrying about congregation numbers and membership numbers, and so it's better to keep up the old mantra because they're afraid people may flock to other memberships and get involved, and because everything is so time consuming. And whereas the fact is, you had this tragedy about this order. Think about it. The most holiest of thou order fighting in the name of Christendom, giving up their lives, literally in a lot of cases, and sacrificing themselves for a cause, only to be betrayed and damned by a mad king called King Philip the Fair, who usurped papal authority by killing the Pope, Pope Boniface. Boniface means a man of good deeds. I'll bring up the actual definition in a later episode. But a lot of people have been called Boniface, and it literally means a good man. And Pope Boniface, he was a man of the cloth. He was a man who was well traveled. He did all the good things, and he was built to become the Pope. If there was any person that was supposed to be a good Pope, in my opinion, I think it was Boniface, and he wanted to unite.
Well, and basically, it was all for money. I mean, the reason they took him down was because they were jealous of the money.
Well, here's the thing: it was not. It was that, and there was the opportunity. So here's the thing: Boniface went from Italy to France. It was unthinkable. It was unthinkable, Billy, that he would go and visit France, and that a king had the audacity to attack the Pope and to kill the Pope. The audacity, the amount of balls. You mean the man went nuts, and some say Philip the Fair went nuts when he lost his wife. The wife tragically apparently died. We don't have too much information, but the wife had a good hold on this king. And one thing you have to realize about kings at that time is they were ordained by God. And the idea was, if you were king, it was God who ordained you. And the issue you have with some of these bloodlines and some of these aristocracies, and you growing up in them, is as the king's son or as the heir, there is so much power you have. There are so much things you can do that you shouldn't do. There are so many things that are overlooked, that can be overlooked in terms of bad behavior. If the mother and the father or the household hasn't got a strong hold on that child, and when they become king and they are given that power, as they say, absolute power corrupts. And when you have a king who wants to introduce autocracy under the crown, what does that mean? What does autocracy means? It means all the power of the land is under the power of one man, and all the laws and all the diktats are done under the will and the privilege of the king. And that's what Philip the Fair wanted. He wanted absolute power, and he believed that it was by his right. And when his wife died, and he had other people who kept feeding them this, like the Nogre, it's very famous in that time as a lawyer.
And that's not even counting all the inbreeding that made him nuts to begin with. So,
well,
I mean, the truth is the truth.
So he was this guy was a bit of a psychopath, right? And one could say a lot of the kings at those times, there were a lot of despots and there were a lot of psychopaths back then. That may have needed a bit of help, which they could have probably found in today's world. Maybe not, we don't know. But anyhow, when you have that particular type of person, and then enemies all around you, England, basically, has a powerful king, Edward I, who unfortunately in the year of 1307, and so what's really interesting is that the actual month when the accusations were made, within about, I think it was 30 days, the English king died. And there is a question if the English king, Edward I, got that information, or was it his son who was probably running the reins, Edward II, because at that time he was literally on his deathbed, very ill for quite some time. And the reason why I bring that up is Edward I was very close with the Templars. But my point being is you have a corruption, which is King Philip the Fair. There are some points that I'm going to bring up in the next Templar episode where there's an interesting battle, which I kind of touched on in the previous episode, where there was this duchy which the Philip the Fair in 13, I think it was 1302 or 1303. Don't quote me, guys, but I'll bring it all up and I'll go through the battle in time. He sent the finest French army with a lot of nobility down there. And apparently this place, how it's described historically, is it was just a bunch of traders and weavers and all that kind of stuff. And these traders and weavers somehow massacred this French army, which sent shockwaves through France, and took Philip the Fair a good half a decade to recover militarily. And the question is well, my question as a historian was there a fairly large Knights Templar commandery there? Lo and behold, there was. And if we go through the Cistercian order and how important trade was with Knights Templary, as I said, they had a massive internal economy within Europe that not only funded the Holy Land, but did a lot of other things within Europe as well. And remember the banking system. You can go and read many books about Templars being the first bankers, right? So there is strong evidence that Templars were involved, not in Templar uniform, but Templars were involved in that battle, which led to the massive loss of one of the most biggest armies in Europe, a superpower at the time, which brought a lot of embarrassment to King Philip the Fair. And he did go back with another army about 5-6 years later, and he was able to subdue him. But that was only after 1307 when he was able to get rid of the Templars and make them go into hiding. And so without the Templar connection and the Templar soldiers and army to support the duchy, maybe not in Templar colours, that duchy fell. Very interesting. The reason why I bring that up is that battle is very emblematic, very emblematical of what happened in the Battle of Bannockburn, which was Robert the Bruce versus the English. Now, you have to remember, the timelines are very, very now getting very close with what's happening to Templars. Templars have all gone. Where have they all disappeared? There was 5,000 Templars in France, but only 500 were only ever found. That's not including the rest of Europe. They all kind of disappeared. So we're talking about tens of thousands of Knights Templars all gone. And if you go with just the arithmetic,
very suspicious,
very suspicious, right? Very suspicious, right? And then we have historians. Very prolific historians who say they went to Scotland and they went to Portugal and some other places. Now, what's really interesting about the Battle of Bannockburn is historians kind of agree there was about close to 5,000 Scotsmen fighting. Now remember, only 500 Knights Templars were found in France when they went to get them. 4,500 just disappeared. And not only that, all their armory, all their money, their fleets gone from France, disappeared. No longer, somehow, poof, like smoke, they've gone. I'm now not saying 4,500 of those people who fought in the Battle of Bannockburn were all Knights Templars, but you just need about 500 to 1,000 Templars in an army for that to swing against a huge army like an English army.
Right, but you got to think, even if there was 20 or 30 that could bring the battle plans, that could teach these people how to fight, because you're fighting with, shepherds and stuff that's never known any kind of directions. That's a completely different, that would be a game changer right there.
Well, one thing, you have the ultimate war-trained fighters who've just come from the Holy Land, who've trained for war, been in war, fought in war and battles, master siegers, master battle planners, created some of the greatest military fortresses which were impenetrable, did some amazing masonry work in terms of fortifications, and suddenly you have all this intel and all this wealth. And so my estimation, my strong speculation of the evidence that we have is that there was a strong contingent of Templars, not in Templar colours, that was in the Battle of Bannockburn. Because in medieval warfare, normally, unless it's like the Hot Gates, which is like you have a rare scene like the Hot Gates, which is this, this tiny little opening on the two mountainsides, and then you got 300 Spartans. It is about numerical superiority. There are only very few battles. There are only a few pitch. If you go, every good historian, every well-documented one of us will tell you that pitch battles are rare to come by. The Battle of Agincourt was a very well-planned British battle plan that did everything they needed to do to win that battle. There were lots of elements that brought the huge French army that not only outnumbered the British, into the entire British, back then the English and the Welsh who were involved in, who were just, bulk of King Henry V's army were archers basically, but they are very rare and few. And so this battle against the might of the English army, which was again the second superpower, and they outnumbered it. They say 2-1 or 3-1 or 4-1. By all means, and then up until then, that's the other thing. Up until then, Robert the Bruce lost every single battle, and suddenly after Bannockburn, he was winning all these battles. Like miraculously, he was winning all these battles. So something happened, and they attained some sort of military might and tech, and I would suggest that the Templars. And something else happened that was really interesting. That happened is when the King Edward II was deposed, Edward III took over. Edward III relinquished all titles, and Edward III was one of the most famous and one of the best kings we had. He gave Scotland to the Scots, and then there was a truce, and not only a truce, but a bondship. And we'll talk about Templar kings in the later episodes, but it's very possible that he was a Templar king because, and I go through it in one of the previous episodes, but I'll go through it all quick. King Edward III changed all the knightly, all the English regalia into St. George's Cross. So suddenly Knights Templar Cross became the British flag, the English, I keep saying British flag, the English flag, St. George's Cross. And the highest order, the Order Garter, was a Knights Templar shield with a Knights Templar belt. That was the highest order until the Victorian Cross in the Victorian era. Huge honour to be part of that knightly order. And so there are a lot of links with Templary and King Edward III that we'll talk about. And then going all the way back to my main point was all of these myths and all of this stuff that's put mud on the Knights Templars was once you're shut down and you're shamed, and the Catholic Church had to, under duress, under King Philip Fair, had to continue the heresy of them being heretics. And remember, when I was growing up, and so 40 years ago, the stories of the Templars was they were heretics and they were burned to the stake. Not much was explained. And so, in my opinion, at that time, the Catholic Church had to hush this up. The order was technically in their heads gone, and they had to just stand their ground. They couldn't explain the fact that the Catholic Church was hijacked and the king took over. It was a massive embarrassment. It's like a big, massive scandal, right? It's like today, a royal scandal, or if something happened, if basically the Pope, if scandal comes that a certain country controls the Vatican and the Pope, and it's a foreign country, basically. Imagine, I don't know, if it was Russia or China or America or anyone saying, oh, the Pope is actually an agent of this particular country. It'll be a huge scandal today. It'll be a massive. It would have been a downfall of the Vatican, the whole papacy, and Catholicism would have had a massive shake-up, and they would have retracted, and there'd been a massive blow to the Catholic Church. Now think about that in 1314. Think about the schism that happened in Europe that suddenly Protestants.
Yeah.
I mean, it was less than 100 years where the clergy, there were famous clergies in England that kind of started the Protestant movement, which kind of exploded around Europe under 200 within less than 200 years of the fall of the Knights Templar. The biggest cover up, the biggest suppression we've had that is coming out now that I'm trying to break is the cover up and the schism of 1307. One king basically changed, Philip the Fair changed the face of Christianity by hijacking the Vatican through Pope Clement and killing Pope Boniface. And a lot of that history was kind of like brushed under the carpet until the past 10 to 15 years. With the Chinon Parchment coming out that we have now from the Vatican, saying that the Vatican itself, the papacy, gave the Templars absolute clemency. Were found, they were forgiven. It was all done, and then we found out that it was Jacques de Molay. He was trying to negotiate the survival of the order for 7 years. You could argue that Jacques de Molay made a mistake. Jacques de Molay and the leaders of the Knights Templars, him being the Grand Master and his officers in command, maybe you could argue their mistake, Billy, was thinking that they could negotiate and get out of this and get a slap in the hand and continue and maybe absolve the king of his debts or whatever. Because you have to remember, in Jacques de Molay's head, he is the Grand Master of the Knights Templars. He is the Grand Master of the most prestigious elite order. Yes, their prestige kind of got a bit blown by when the Holy Land was lost, but this was still a very powerful, very well respected order. And so maybe it was ego. It could have been ego. Maybe it was a bad miscalculation. Maybe you didn't know how power hungry Philip the Fair was, and how much hatred he had for the Templars because of his paranoia, or because of remember, Philip the Fair, he kicked all the Jews out of Paris. This guy wasn't a nice guy. He did a lot of things before he actually persecuted the Knights Templars. He also persecuted the Jews. He also did the same thing to a lot of his enemies. This guy was a horrible, horrible man. And so we have to understand the schism that's been brushed under the carpet that changed not only a knightly order, but Europe itself. And how the papacy never really recovered, because after that, once the kings of Europe learned that it only took one king to control the papacy, that's how Protestants happened. And that's when Henry VIII, and again, all these characters are within the 200-year period. Henry VIII of England is very famous of being the English king that moved away from Catholicism and became a Protestant country. And people think, and then the story is told, he did it because of the wives. Now, there is a strong case for that, but that wasn't the only reason. You got to understand, the nobility, part of the clergy, this has been going on for centuries and decades of the issue and the struggle the Catholic Church was having in retaining their power and dominance, where the problem is when they lost the Templars, when they lost their military arm to keep the peace in Europe, Philip the Fair figured out that Catholicism, or the papacy, only had control of the word, but that word can be completely taken over by military might. Might makes right? How would the knightly orders think about Philip the Fair? What would the tensions be like between the Pope's army, which were the Knights Templars and such likes, between them and their interactions? How cold and sordid would the interactions become following up? And then finding out that Boniface was... I mean, think about it. Boniface was killed, right? Attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And then quickly, Philip the Fair installed Clement. I mean, that's the scandal within itself. And the fact that it was all papered
Mm-hmm.
over. The Catholic Church couldn't do anything. They had to paper. So the reason why I get so animated about this is that this is huge. This is a huge,
Yeah.
huge scandal. And the fact that everyone went along to get along, because I'm trying to bring you guys into that world and understand how much of a massive schism this is, what this one tyrant despot did, and how it changed the face of Europe, and all that, and it's huge, and the ramifications of that this king is still felt today, and so. And so, and it's just been it's remarkable for me. It's just like, there's so much to tell you guys, and again, I know I've gone through a lot of things and giving you historical nuggets here and there and timelines, and there's a lot to piece together. And there's a lot of, I mean, I go out and do actual lectures that actually go through this step by step. And they are 2-hour lectures, and there's a series of lectures that I've given that goes through all these one by one. And we're limited with time on the podcast, and so we're trying to break this up into series. But we wanted to. I want to set the tone. The point of this episode is to set the tone of the real schism that the ear of God, the Holy of Holies, was murdered. He died of his wounds. A town rebelled against the French king and his men, and saved the Pope only barely for him to escape. And 8 days later, he died of his wounds. That's how badly he was beaten. They beat the Pope up. They literally. I mean, to die of your wounds meant they was.
That's bad.
That's.
And could you imagine what that would be now? If someone like that would happen now?
Yeah, imagine that got out. We're getting all this information now. Imagine that got out. Imagine there was a universal news media where people can watch this, and it was sent, and England got it, France, Germany got it. Do you know what would have happened in that time? Christendom would have rose and attacked the king, and French nobles who didn't like the king, he would have been kicked out. He would have been hung, dried, and quartered. The scandal, and then the papacy would have been restored, and maybe it would have maybe Protestantism would have never have happened, or maybe it would have happened later down during the centuries. I mean, it's just amazing how some inflection points in history changes the course of an entire continent. But what's profound to me is how much this has not been talked about and revealed.
Right.
And we're bringing this forward here in this show to show you the tragic story of the Knights Templars. And what's really cool is that purity, that godliness, to that belief of being good and serving your community and serving your people, that's carried down through the centuries with humility, in closed doors, and continuing the good work. And the good work
I think Sam tells you all this stuff to let you know the reason the Knights Templar had to be smeared is because with the work they were doing, nobody would have believed these things about the Knights Templars. No. And it wouldn't have been, you couldn't just round them up. Nobody would ever believe them. You had to come up with all these wicked tales so that people would say, oh, okay, well, it had to be done then. Otherwise they would have been uprising against the king. So they can't have that. So that's what all this is all about.
And I'll finish off with a real story, a real antidote that actually, I was part of. And it shows you what Knights Templary is and why Knights Templarism is. And it was because I went through the Order of the Temple and I became a Knights Templar. And back in the days, if you go in decades ago, the actual path to becoming Knights Templar was excruciatingly hard, much harder than it is today. And degrees weren't given as quickly as we do them today. But when I became a Knights Templar, and I really... so I'm a Knights Templar. I'm also part of the Sovereign Military Order of Jerusalem as well, which is recognized by the United Nations. But anyhow, the point is the oaths that I made, and that keep me as a knight, basically. We set up in my local area. We set up a charity for a long time. You know, because of lack of numbers or whatever, you know, there wasn't enough manpower to produce these committees, and so when I got in, I was able to recruit a lot of good men, and with a tiny, small but very active army of Knights Templars who wanted to do as much as they can and uphold to their values. And so we built this charity committee, and a lot of us were fairly young and excited and new to all this. And so we're trying to figure out what to do. And what's really amazing about the Grand Commandery is they were giving out these checks to all the commanderies in Illinois. They'll give out every year $2,000 checks. And like, listen, give it to charities in your local area, look after your community. That's freaking awesome, you know? And so you can give it to food banks, you can give it to, you know, causes for autism, any charity you want. You can give as long as your area agreed with it and it was voted on. And so a lot of money has been given over the years thanks to Illinois Grand Commandery, and they've done they do amazing.
Ours give to the food banks of the area. They divide them up.
Yeah, there you go.
It feeds a lot of people.
So we got so for me, when I was eminent commander, I wanted to democratize power and structure within my commandery, and give it to the knights, basically, and get the knights to have a more buy-in. Very much like the Cistercian order. You know, it's about getting everyone, many hands make light work. And so I had a lot of good committees that we set up. And one of the committees, which was the charity committee, we're trying to figure out, and, you know, we had a few good ideas and we were solid on those. But one question came up about schools. And it was like, okay, what can we do for schools in the area? And me being me is like, well, I make loads of pencils every year, and, you know, in the hundreds of thousands, and we can give pencils to everyone. And you know, some people who have been living here in this area, although knew that giving all these pencils for free would have been great, and we can get them at a good price, and every kid can have a pencil in a particular school, would be great. That may not be the most productive thing that they actually need. And we got really heated because we're all very passionate. You know, there was a very heated debate, and I was like, you know what? Let me pick up the phone and just talk to a teacher that I've known for a long time, and I don't really talk to her quite much, but it's a friend of a brother. And I picked up the phone and I went, Diane, you're a school teacher, aren't you? Like, yeah. She's like, yeah. I was like, your kids, how old are they in your school? They said, they will do 5 to 12-year-olds. I'm like, okay. What do they need the most? Because I can make all these pencils, and do you need all the pencils? I can make thousands of them, and we'll donate them for free. And she thought about it actually. She actually said, no. You know, she took some time to think. And what do you need? No, we're okay with stationery, but what we need, and I had no idea. I'm clueless. I'm in the bubble. I'm in Sam's bubble, living in my bubble, my life. I live in a very nice area. I'm very blessed. You know, I remember about that time I was living in a very nice area, very, very blessed, very, very blessed, living in the bubble. And she says, you know what we need? And I didn't know what type of school she was teaching, where she was teaching. I was absolutely clueless. I just knew she was a teacher. I said, well, we have these kids that come in, and they don't have underpants. They have toes sticking out their shoes, and that becomes problematic in the winter, which is kind of funny because I'm talking in the winter now, where I've got about 8 inches worth of snow, and it's bloody freezing, and it was very difficult to drive around in the past couple of days, and the snow really shut a lot of things down. But the problem is that these kids, they don't have winter clothes. These kids are destitute. These kids are not what I call below the poverty line. They are destitute. And I heard stories later on, and some horrible stories, like how they live in this, like, you can't even call it a house. It's more like a box with two families sharing the same bathroom, sharing the same room to sleep. It's destitute. And I'm like, how the hell can this happen in America? Well, because you got to understand, like, in the area that I was in at that time, you have Caterpillar and you have, a multi-billion-dollar company. You got Komatsu. You've got these huge hospitals that make hundreds of millions of dollars. You've got these companies, these law firms. And in their backyard, there is this school which has these kids who are no fault for themselves. Now, you can criticize the parents and, the way they live their lives and all that kind of stuff. And we can go into that, and you can have sympathy, or you could be on whatever spectrum you want to be on. But in my mind is, regardless of the parents and the situation,
it ain't the kid's fault.
These 5-year-olds, girls and boys to 12-year-olds, they're innocent. They are the innocent. It's yes. They have no fault here, but they are living a life of destiny. Imagine, I cannot fathom my boy, he's now 7, back then, walking with his toe sticking out of his shoes, not having the proper dress code because he can't. And the problem is that these teachers were so frightened of the schools getting shut down because they're worried about if these kids were fed. So this really got to me back then. I'm over it now, but this really got to me. I mean, it was at that time. My eyeballs were swelling with tears. I was like, how the hell do we get to this place where so many of us are living so well, but we're looking the other way? So I went on the crusade, and it was a humble amount. We raised a humble amount of money. We raised a humble amount of money, and I said to the school, I said, the only stipulation of this money is that you give us a bill for every item of clothing that you spent on these kids. And the money that we gave them was enough to clothe these kids 2 years in a row. And the stories that we got, and again, I made it a very important thing not to meet the kids because there are a lot of places that need our help, and we've got to keep neutral to help as many people as we can. And we can't help we can't help everyone. We can only be strategic in what we're doing. We don't have, a copious amount of funds. And so one of the stories that kind of like touched me was all these teachers and the secretary of the school got all the stuff they needed. Teachers knew exactly what they needed. And then when they clothed one of these kids, and this kid was fully clothed, and when the mum came to pick her up at the end of the day and saw the kid completely fully clothed with a winter jacket, proper socks, shoes, trainers, the mum just broke down in tears. Absolute tears, like shedding constant. Even when I talk about it, it kind of like brings tears to my eyes. And that's the kind of thing that we're here for. So the point is that's what Templar is about, to protect the community, to be there for the orphans and the widows, and protect the poor, and do well. And if it wasn't for us, this may have continued. And this is probably 2023. This isn't 1909 or 1800. So my point is to the brothers around the world and to fellow Sir Knights and people listening is, we're it. There is no one. We live in this era of convenience that we're thinking that, there must be. There were people amongst our ranks that thought, there must be some charity that does this. There must be some organization that gives. There isn't. There wasn't. We're it. In this area, we were it. And so my point is that, we have a duty to find out what's going on in our communities. We have an obligation to be there for the people of our communities. And we have an obligation to do what small things we can, whatever we can, however small. It doesn't have to be large amounts of money. It's the smallest things we can do bring out the biggest benefits. Now, if you're in a situation where you have a good amount of money, and in particular, what we call in England priories or here commanderies, then obviously you give more. You don't give more than you take in, but you give more. And so you do what you can do within your ability, and whatever that is fantastic. And so our duty is not to sit in our chairs in our comfortable houses, fiddle with our phones and doom scroll, and to enjoy the good football match. Our duty is to help those, because if one of those kids, because of clothing and doing what we did in the previous year, I'm not sure what's happened in this year, because I've been busy, getting ready to run my craft lodge, my Blue Lodge, but
yeah,
if one of the kids are able to change their life chances and focus on their education by small acts of kindness like this, and get out of the slums and get out of the ghettos, let's just say, then it's been worth it. It's been worth it. If out of the hundreds of kids that we probably touched, and the handful of kids we've touched, if we can change a couple of their lives for just making sure they've been clothed well, and they've been taken care of, so they can focus on their studies and do well, it's all been worth it. So that's all
absolutely.
That's all I got to say. Any last words, Billy?
No, you know what? I'd like to end on a positive note and tell everyone Godspeed. Thank you for being there, and please share this with your friends.
Thank you for listening to On the Level Podcast, your Masonic podcast. When you are ready, duly and truly prepared, you can always knock on the door.